My father announced that he was going fishing in the river near our house one summer day while on vacation. I pleaded with him to let me tag along so that I could play in the water while he fished. I asked 4 boys from the neighborhood if they would like to join us, and they all agreed. We stacked up into Dad's car and drove to the river together. We moved about 50 meters away from Dad's fishing spot and ran into the water when we arrived at the river. My father announced that he was going upstream and asked us to follow him as he walked along the bank after about an hour of playing in the water. We started paddling upstream. Just one of the 5 boys who was a friend of mine can swim. Although he taught me to swim many times, I still had difficulty in controlling my breath under the water. As we waddled upstream, I was about 10 steps behind everyone else. I fell through a hole that I had stepped into. I didn't have time to take a breath before collapsing because it happened so quickly. When I broke through the surface, I started fighting my way to the top and swallowing water, and then I began spitting water but did not get a breath of air before returning to the depths. I fought my way to the surface and started spitting water. But before I could get a breath of air, I went back under. No matter how hard I tried to do so, the water still took control of me as if it wanted to kill me right away. This struggle took place several times. I was also out of breath. I was getting tired of the struggle as well. I became enraged at myself for failing to take the necessary breaths of air as I struggled in the water. I was above water for brief periods of time, but it wasn't enough for me to take a long breath. At last, I became so exhausted that I gave up everything and stopped struggling. Immediately went into slow motion. My movements were excruciatingly slow, just like they are on TV or in movies. I became aware that my arms and legs were moving at such a painfully slow speed that they were rendered useless. At this point, I was aware of rising up out of my body. I was unconcerned about being in 2 places at the same time as I looked at my struggling body. I wasn't actually in 2 places at the same time because my soul, yes, my soul, got out of my body. I was up here and my body was down there. I was watching my body try to cope in the water, but from where I was standing, I couldn't feel any struggle or water on me. I then began to rise even higher, coming to a halt about 10 feet above the water and floating there. I was both surprised and relieved to be above the water and that I wasn't in pain from struggling and inhaling too much water. I wasn't overwhelmed from the previous battle below, either. As I pondered my situation, I became aware of a realm of light about 20 feet away. It was incredibly bright and stopped at my eye level. It was about the size of a basketball, and the light swirled around within its confines like smoke swirling in the air. Despite this, it emitted extremely bright light rays. In the center of the light, I noticed a small pure black speck. For some reason, I was completely focused on that speck. It moved closer to me and grew larger as I stared at it, until it was the same size as me. And out of it came Jesus, who stood before me. I raised my hands as if shielding myself from him and told him to leave me alone. I was undeserving of his presence because he was a pure holy being. I was a mere mortal, tainted by the physical world's sinful nature. Any feelings of guilt or unworthiness vanished when he extended his hand towards me. In front of me, he stood majestically. He radiated golden light in all directions and had a rich golden complexion. We cannot see the speed of light because it travels at slightly more than 186,000 miles per second, but I could see his glorious light emanating from him in all its majestic glory. My command of the English language could not do justice to the lovely radiance he radiated. Not only could I see this light, but it also seemed to provide me with spiritual energy and divine power. The light radiated in all directions, carrying the love, wisdom, and grace of Jesus. It seemed to reach into my soul. He stood before me with his long hair and beard, dressed in the clothes we see in paintings and drawings of him, clothes that he wore during his time on the earth 2,000 years ago. He said something to me, but I don't recall exactly what he said. He effectively stated, "Fear not, be at ease." His voice was moderately loud and melodic. That I've been deaf since birth and have always had difficulty hearing in speech. Due to my poor hearing, I struggled to get to class and pass my classes. I had a hard time connecting with my teachers and classmates, and I barely passed my exams to advance to the next grade level. When Jesus spoke to me, however, I heard him very clearly and succinctly. His voice sounded like music and was very melodious. When he talked to me, he didn't move his lips. When I spoke to him, my lips didn't move. It's as if we communicated through extrasensory perception, or specifically through extrasensory perception. When I attempted to speak with him, I had yet another strange experience. As soon as I thought of what I wanted to say, he heard me before I could even say anything. He seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. Throughout the day, we communicated in this manner. Many people believe that when we die, our entire lives flash before our eyes, and this is exactly what they mean. When Jesus brought my attention to a scene, it zoomed out until it almost filled the screen, but I was aware of other scenes that were still active around the edges of the scene that was now the focus of our conversation. As we watched the main scene that was playing in front of us, he asked me questions about what had happened. He was curious as to why I had deceived my mother. He wanted to know why I was pulling my sister's hair. He wanted to know why I was throwing rocks at my dog. He was perplexed as to why I had yanked the tail of my neighbor's cat. We saw a lot of scenes, and I wished I had told someone a lie. I saw a lot of things, including scenes where I was bullying someone. Scenes where I was the one who insulted someone. And scenes in which I had ripped someone's clothes for the sheer joy of it. As we discussed each scene, he reminded me that I had done something seriously wrong or that I had done something exceptionally well. I had to respond to him and explain why I had acted in the way I had. I was well aware that I had explained my actions in all of the scenes incorrectly. And when I tried to lighten the tone of my response in order to downplay the gravity of my actions, he immediately corrected me. He lavished praise on me in scenes where I had done something admirable. Jesus had a great sense of humor, and he laughed heartily and joyfully whenever something amusing occurred. I had a feeling I was in big trouble with him because the number of scenes in which I did something right was significantly lower than the number of scenes in which I did something wrong. In fact, I was growing increasingly concerned that I would be sentenced to eternal damnation. The screen vanished, he took my hand in his, and we began gravitating through a tunnel at breakneck speed. The walls, ceiling, and floor of this tunnel appear to be churning actively, similar to how smoke churns in the air above an open fire, but denser. Trees, power line poles, and anything else that is stationary along the road appeared to flash by in a blur as you passed them when traveling at high speeds down the road. In this tunnel, there was no haziness. It felt as if the walls, ceiling, and floor were all moving at breakneck speed alongside me. However, I had no idea the tunnel was moving. When I looked ahead and saw the light far ahead of me, I realized how quickly time was passing. Aha, I thought we were finally getting somewhere, but then I wasn't there. As he reached for me, one of my friends swam under me and brushed my foot with his hand. At that point, I was back in my body in the water. I was gasping for air and desperately trying to reach the water's surface once more. My friend swam under my legs, lifted me to the surface, and started swimming towards the shore. It tasted like the sweetest air I'd ever inhaled. As he swam a short distance with me on his back, I gasped for air. I noticed he was having trouble as well. I realized I'd drown him if I kept weighing him down, so I slid one leg over him and slid into the water. As soon as my feet touched the riverbed, he came up gasping for air. Before collapsing on the bank, we both struggled to the shore. During the struggle, I began vomiting up the river water I had swallowed. I swallowed so much water that it stretched my stomach to breaking point, causing me to vomit several times. Before starting to dry heave another 10 or 15 times, I must have vomited water 15 times or more. All over my body, I was in excruciating pain. My muscles and stomach were exhausted from the struggle, as well as the stretching caused by the excess water and the prolonged vomiting and heaving. My father decided we'd had enough for the day and drove us all home. As I reflected on the experience over the next few days and weeks, I never remembered the scenes with Jesus or traveling through the tunnel. All I could remember was that my entire life had flashed before my eyes. Many years later, I was reading a newspaper article about someone who had a near-death experience, and some of the scenes he described seemed to jog my memory. After some consideration, I realized that I had developed post-traumatic stress disorder at the time and was unable to recall the events.